January 14th, 2009, and I am here with Mr. Charlie Appleyard. May I ask you what your birthday is?
Yes. Oh, you make me feel old. January 30th, 1927.
What was it like growing up in the 30s and the 40s as a...
Well, the 30s was the Depression. And I guess we were pretty fortunate because my father had a job and he worked hard and he progressed, so we didn't know it was a recession. We, except some of the neighbors had problems and troubles, and maybe had to move away or out of a job, but you know, we didn't go hungry or anything like that.
You were able to stay in the same place?
Yeah, yeah.
Where?
That was in Yonkers, New York.
New York?
Yeah.
So is that where you grew up?
Yep. Yep.
No, and who was in your family? Did you have any like brothers or sisters?
I had a younger sister.
Is that where you graduated from?
Yeah. Yeah.
What got you into the military?
Pardon?
What got you into the military?
The draft. Well, World War II was popular. It was a nice, no, it wasn't a nice war. It was a good war. We had been attacked. And we were fighting for our existence or our lives, and everybody wanted to do something. And so after I got out of high school, I still had a few months to go before, you know, in January I still had 6 months to go before I'd be 18. And I thought, oh gee, maybe I can get in the Army, the Navy, not the Army. And a friend of mine was a month or so older than I was. He felt the same way, except he wanted to get in the Marines. He was in a different school, different village, and we both had banged up our knees slightly, so we had water on the knee. Well, the selective service system by 1944 and 45 really had this down to a science. They were taking in people and putting them where they wanted, and didn't want enlistments really, because nobody wanted the infantry in the Army. So they turned us both down. As it ended up, it's ironic, he ended up being drafted into the Marines, which is where he wanted to go in the first place. But I was drafted and I went in the Army.
So they turned you down the first time, but then drafted you?
Oh yeah, by that time the knee was better. I was 18, I didn't need parental consent or anything, and off I went.
Were those dates like a long time between the time that you went to enlist and the time that they actually drafted you?
Yeah, about 6 months. About 6 months from, because I got out of high school in June, and I was 18 the following January.
What actually did you do in the military?
What did I do in the military?
Yes, like what was your job?
Well, I didn't do very much to win the war, if that's what you're wondering. I went in and went to infantry basic training. And that's what they wanted. They wanted infantrymen. And so we went to, about 4 months of basic training. And it soon became obvious during this time, of course, the war in Europe was over. The E-Day was in May. So it became very obvious that, gee, we were going to invade Japan. And they were talking about 750,000 to 1 million casualties. And at that time, they thought, you know, the Japanese are going to fight to the last man. They were sending kamikaze pilots over to sink down. So we started to pay attention.
Yes.
We thought, gee, we better learn what we're doing here. And of course, then they dropped the bomb. So that was the end of that. Gee, should we send these guys to occupy? They hate the Japanese, so they started a series of propaganda. They weren't so bad, etc. We got them licked, etc. But I never went. I ended up going, of all places, to South America. And when you get back, you'd appreciate it a little more. Get on the computer and go to Guiana.
Isn't that in the top of South
Oh,
America?
did you find it? Oh, okay. okay, it's on the northeast shoulder, yeah, near Trinidad. And why are we going here? And then I found out that back in 1940, the British were in real trouble. With the ships being sunk by the U-boats in the Atlantic.
Oh, yeah.
It was very crucial. So Roosevelt, you know, this is the powers of the presidency. Roosevelt said, okay, we've got 58 World War I destroyers sitting around doing nothing. You can have those, but give us bases to protect ourselves. So we got a base in Newfoundland, Bermuda, I think the Bahamas, a few, Trinidad. One I never heard of was British Guiana. That was one of the bases we got. I never remembered that. But anyway, there we were. So we got off the boat, and they said, okay, now you're a military policeman. Not an infantryman anymore. You're a military policeman.
Just like that, they
Yeah,
changed?
yeah. So now, I'm fighting American soldiers. No, I'm being facetious, but we never fought him. But that was our job, to maintain order on the base and in the capital of Georgetown. So, really the only extraordinary, I feel was extraordinary, thing was I met Eisenhower.
Did you?
Yeah.
Do you want to tell me about that?
Yeah, that was my big story. Well, first of all, going back a little, I first told you how we were there, how the U.S. was there. And they built this base 35 miles up the river from the capital, because the first 35 miles, the coastline is pretty much swamp, and this is finally getting on solid ground. So they built an airfield there. And in 1941 and 42, it was fairly important because we were sending airplanes to the British in Africa. And Montgomery was fighting his way to Egypt and Libya. And so the planes would stop it and refuel in British Guiana, then go to either Brazil or across to Dakar in Africa, and on up. So for a while, you know, it was pretty important. But we had this nation had a 50-year lease. Nice for an old destroyer, good deal. So anyway, the climate is tropical. It's hot and it's humid. And
did you still have to wear like your whole uniform, the pants and everything?
No, never wore a tie. Usually wore the sleeves rolled up a bit. Never wore leggings. It was hot, and all you do was sweat.
I imagine that would have been unbearable in like a full.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm coming to that too, because we did go through that. And so it was there were only 200 men there, tops, all the time we were there. And a lot of those were transients, being Air Force people flying in and out. And then we had a small group of 6 of us in the capital, in Georgetown. We took over an old hotel. Because the only way you got from the base into the capital, 35 miles, was down a river. There was no road. Well, there was a dirt track.
So barely a road.
You never used it unless you had to get a vehicle into the capital. So you went by boat, and instead of an overnight pass, you got a 3-day leave. So I was there for a while, and then the climate being hot and tropical, it would get up to about 90 or 92 or so, and then rain. Rain. I don't think I've ever seen it rain so hard in all the time I've been back in this country. Just poured down in buckets. And the temperature would go down after a half hour, an hour, and then the rain would stop, and the sun would come out, and it'd build up again. And they had a rainy season and dry season, but I could never tell the difference between the two, to be honest with you. And so, by this time it's in 1946, the war was over, and Eisenhower was leaving Europe and coming back to become Chief of Staff. So on his way back, measure of the man, he wanted to see and meet, he wanted to see some of the places and meet some of the men who had backed up the war in Europe.
That's
in
awesome.
Africa, Brazil, British Guiana, Panama, Trinidad, etc. So, he's gonna come, so, we had it's really a comedy of errors. We had a lieutenant colonel in charge of the base, and I think he would dearly love to be a full colonel. So he decided, he called us back from town, canceled all the leaves, and we were going to become an honor guard when Eisenhower came down. And Eisenhower was going to spend the night there, and he was going to stay in the colonel's house. Another thing I should mention is, with the climate and the rain, everything was built on a second story. Everything was elevated. So,
Is that for flooding purposes?
yeah, because it rained so much and damp and all these insects, everything was built up one. So, we went into the warehouse and found some leggings and some helmet liners and some these are canvas leggings and canvas cartridge belts that you wore. And what he really was looking for is called Sam Brown belts. They go over your shoulder and down around your waist, and they're brown leather, really great looking. But we couldn't find any. So then we found some Griffin all white, which used to be used on saddle shoes. Your grandmother probably wore saddle shoes, and you put it on and made your shoes nice and white. So we took the Griffin all white and whitened the canvas belts and the canvas leggings and the light steel helmet liners. It didn't look too bad, except it rained.
So it's all the way
It
washed
rained,
out?
yeah. So it was a pretty sad looking crew standing out there. Well, we all ducked under shelter before the plane landed, but we got wet a little bit, and he landed, and we stood at attention, you know. So then he went over to the colonel's house, and I was picked to guard the house. And the house was all about from here to the next cottage, away from the road. It was down a little driveway, and there was a carport underneath. As I say, the buildings were all second story, so you drove underneath and got out, and up the stairs you went. So my instructions were to go back and forth, standing guard, with only my rifle and a pistol. This is ridiculous, but that's the way it was. And just go back and forth and guard his house. So of course nothing happened. Oh, he had a few of his staff with him. One was a master sergeant. He had a naval aide. He had a few more people, so they went to the house. So I'm going back and forth. And guess what? It rained. So, as you say, you mentioned before trying to wear a uniform in that climate. They had raincoats, but if you wore a raincoat, you'd be twice as wet on the inside from sweat as on the outside. It was like an oilskin raincoat. So we never wore raincoats. So I'm out there getting wet, and it wasn't a cold rain. It was warm, hot. But anyway, I got good and soaking wet. So then it stopped, and I continued back and forth. And of course, the white all started to run down my shirt and down my pants, and all streaks. I was sad looking sack. And so his naval aide came out, beckoned to me, went down. He said, "Corporal." I said, "Yes, sir." Boy, the last thing I wanted was any problems. He said, "The general has said that when it rains, you don't need to walk back and forth. You can stand under the carport." I said, "Oh, thank you very much." Okay. Back I went. Well, another 20 minutes went by. Down came the rain, so I ducked under the carport, which was right at the foot of the stairs, and I'm standing there looking around. And the colonel, I call him my colonel, the colonel of the base came down. And he knew me. Appleyard. Geez, I could see the color going up in his cheeks. "You're supposed to be out there guarding, facing back and forth." I said, "Sir," I finally got a word in. I said, "The commander told me that the general had said I didn't need to stand out there when it rained. I could stand here." He said, "You're not in the blankety-blank Navy. You're in the blankety-blank Army. Get out there." Back I went.
Marching in the rain.
Yeah. Well, I give him credit. About 3 minutes later, he said, my apologies. He said, you're right. He thought I was making up a story, apparently. But he said, well, yeah. So I said, okay. So I stood there, and the rain was just letting up, and they were going to go up to the officers' club for dinner. So I'm standing there, and then the driver came up in the car, and so General Eisenhower comes down the steps. I'm straight as whip, I'm going to do this right, and I'm right at attention. He says, at ease. Okay. He said, good evening, Corporal. Well, there was another corporal within 100 yards. He must be talking to me. I said, yes, sir. He wanted to know my name, and whenever, in the service, whenever you gave your name, you always gave your rank and serial number, because this is how you got paid. So whenever they asked your name,
like
the rest of it,
the
whole thing came out. So he said, and he said, you regular Army? I said, no, sir. I said, he said, what are you going to stay in? I said, no, sir. I said, I plan to go back to college. I got a year of college in before I came in the service, and with the GI Bill, I plan to go back. He said, well, that's fine. He said, where are you from? So I told him Yonkers. Oh, yes, just north of New York City. I said, yes. Oh, fine, good. Well, nice seeing you. He said, best of luck to you in the future. You know what I'm saying. Gee, and you know that, you've seen pictures, that famous grin?
Yes.
There's the grin. So.
Must have been pretty exciting.
Yeah, it was in a way. I was also a little flabbergasted. And so we found out that was the end for me. I went back to the barracks and dried out. And we found out later that another one of our platoon took my place. See, so I passed the word, walk back and forth like you're supposed to, and then, but if it rains, you can stand under the carport. I said, fine. We found out later, about an hour and a half later, he was back in the barrack. What do you do? I've been relieved. What happened was, they got talking at the officers' club, we found out, and Eisenhower had said, look, the war is over. You're surrounded on 3 sides by jungle and a mile-wide river. What's going to happen? He said, what do you have at night? He said, usually 2 men on duty. He said, that's the way you should have it. So my other buddy, his name was Bailey, sent him back. He didn't have any more to do that night. There was no guard or anything else, especially for him. And he also sent word on to Trinidad and Panama, the same general type of climate. You don't need to have an honor guard standing out there in the airport for me. So that's the kind of the guy he was. So that was that. Next morning he took off. But there's a sequel. It has nothing to do with the service. But 3 years later, I was back in college, and I was going to Columbia University in New York. Guess who they named president? Eisenhower. He was president of Columbia University. So he said, I passed the word, any time that he was going around the campus, he'd certainly like to stop and talk to the students, et cetera, et cetera.
Sounds like a really humble guy.
Yeah. So one day, we're walking across the quadrangle, and he's coming the other way, and I don't know, gray suit and a Homburg, and there was 4 of us. Gee, we certainly didn't want to turn tail and run, it'd be too obvious. Oh, well, stop and talk to him. So, this real good friend of mine had ended up on the Pacific, so I said, now what is your name? Were you in service? We're all from the service. Yeah, I was in the Pacific. Oh. He said, I don't know too much about that. He said, where were you? He said, Christmas Island. He said, I know less now than I did before. He said, where's Christmas Island? So he explained to him. And another fellow never went overseas, and a third fellow had been wounded in France in a little crossroads town, and the Germans put up a anti-tank gun and stopped this part of Patton's army cold, and it was a little insignificant battle. It lasted maybe half a day, and they broke through, and he got wounded there. he mentioned it, I said, oh yeah, I remember that, blah, 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 and told him some of the details and how it held up Patton's Third Army for half a day. You know, it was, you wouldn't think that he would know about little things like that.
Just full of knowledge.
Oh, yeah, yeah, and best of luck to you, and this and that. You know, so he got to me. I said, sir, we met before. We have. Where? So, British Guiana. British Guiana? Oh. So I told him, oh, he said, you were the poor slob that got caught out in the rain. And I said, yes, sir, that's me. He said, well, he said, a lot of pomp and ceremony in the Army is not always necessary. You know, and then he wanted to know a few things about the college and the GI Bill, and then we went our way and he went his. But that same grin, you know.
Sounds like a really great guy.
Yeah, oh yeah, he was a humble guy, and I thought then that he was looking out not just for the officers but for the enlisted men. That was my opinion of him.
How long did you spend in British Guiana?
Just about a year. Just about a year.
And like when you were there, could you contact your family at all or no?
Letters, that's all. No. The only, you've seen third world countries. I think at that time British Guiana was like fourth world, I think. Except for the capital. It was really, really primitive. Really backward. And I say right outside the base was a village, and it was thatch huts, you know, about this. Instead of being a story above the ground, they were this high off the ground. And the capital of Georgetown, at the time, I think it had maybe 50,000 people, and it was spread out. It was right at the mouth of the Demerara River in the Atlantic Ocean. And the main business was taking care of the ships because there was about a 35-foot tide there, almost as much as in the Bay of Fundy. So the ships would come to the mouth of the river, and depending on the tide and all the sediment that was coming down the rivers, they'd have to stop. Because then the tide would change and they'd go up the river. So they'd unload a lot of stuff right there at Georgetown. And then the freighters would go right up the river, oh geez, I can't remember how far, to a bauxite mine. And they'd haul out the bauxite, which eventually became aluminum. So it was valuable place to be. But I've often wondered how far they've come in the last 60 years.
Would you ever want to go back?
Yeah, yeah. Just like 2 days, just to see what progress they have made. And because the only other thing that ever happened there, to my knowledge, was Jonestown. Remember all those people got poisoned themselves?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was British Guiana. And that was hacked out of jungle.
So it's kind of like a tropical
Yeah,
area.
yeah, it was. And they were very, very careful about malaria. You know, you used whatever it took. And you took pills, and then they sprayed whatever. But on the base, where we were better off because we were a little higher and not down on the lowlands near the river and the ocean.
Gotcha. So, being an American in the 1940s, do you remember when FDR died?
Oh yeah.
How do you think it affected Americans? Do you think they were really upset about it, or?
Well, he died in April. I had gone in not that long in the service, that month before, and it was a big letdown. And for most of us at the time, we were the only president he was the only president we ever remembered. You know, he took office in 1933. We were, what, 5 years old, whatever. So it was a real blow. Most of the fellows in basic training were either had just turned 18 or were in their late 30s.
So there's like a big gap.
Yeah, yeah. They'd taken all the training beforehand. So then everybody said, now who? Truman? Who was Truman? I think Harry wondered who too. Because, that was tough. That was tough. But I've always admired Harry Truman because he was the one that decided to drop the atomic bomb. And if he hadn't done that, maybe I wouldn't be here. You know, like I said, we were going to invade.
Do you think it was hard for the Americans to put their trust in a new president after they had in the middle of the war?
Well, then, you mean, yeah, it was. But he said to Eleanor Roosevelt, he said, may God be with you and may God help you. And she said, Harry, you're the one that needs God's help. And he did, because he knew nothing.
That's a big task.
Yeah. We found out later, of course, that Roosevelt had never, I think they had one meeting for lunch one day, and he didn't know Truman didn't know what was going on. So, no, it wasn't difficult, I don't think. They wanted him to succeed, and of course he kept everybody, the cabinet and the military as is. He made no changes in that at first. So everybody said, oh, okay, we've been doing all right so far.
How did you feel returning home after being for so long?
Oh, wonderful. It was great, yeah. I thought it was just fine. I guess it's one of those experiences that you wouldn't miss for $1 million, and you wouldn't go through it again for 2 minutes. I think that was my feeling.
So overall, you think it was a good experience?
Pardon?
Overall, you think it was a good experience, even though you wouldn't want
Oh,
to?
yeah. Because I didn't get shot at, you know, I wasn't in any danger. That part was good because I got in late. You know, there's been people I know and other people that, have you ever talked to Tom Jones? Okay.
I haven't, but somebody in my class did.
Yeah, yeah. Boy. And then there's, sure, now I can't think of his name. This happens at our age, you forget names. I was never good, but now it's worse. But he, you know, I consider myself very fortunate because he went to 2 or 3 battles and was blinded at Okinawa. From bullet wounds. You can't repair that. So, an awful lot of people had a lot worse time than I ever did.
Do you remember where you were when you found out that Pearl Harbor had been bombed?
Yeah. Cornstalk State Park in Putnam County. My father had gotten, somehow, a friend of his had asked him to go with him. He had gotten tickets to the Giants football game, and my mother said, oh, gee, it's a nice day. Let's go take a ride. So we took a ride. We had the car radio on. We were in this beautiful state park, all nice woods, and over, it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And over the radio came the news. So we all, and she slowed down, found the space to turn around, turned around, and we went home. That's all she could think of, was going home. We were going to be safe there. And we really weren't sure where Pearl Harbor was, to be honest with you, but we had been attacked. And so then my father came home early because something was wrong. He didn't know what, but the loudspeaker system kept calling people. This, I think, was the Polo Grounds in New York City. And they were all generals and colonels and admirals
I knew something was going on.
over the loudspeaker system. So, will you please report? He figured something's up. He didn't know what until after the game was over. Oh yeah, things like that.
So do you think it set everyone into a panic?
Oh no, not a panic. Well, first of all, we found out that Pearl Harbor was far away. Number one. Number two, we couldn't believe how the Japanese got there. That was amazing. And then the third point was that, gee, if they got that far, they might be able to get to California or Oregon or Washington. So we better be on. No, I don't think there was any panic that I recall. There might have been on the West Coast, but I have no way of knowing. There was just determination.
To retaliate or to just protect the homeland?
Well, determination to fight and win. And Roosevelt gave his speech on this day will live in infamy. And then Germany declared war on us the next day, and of course we turned around and declared war on Germany the next day after that. So it was just the fact that, boy, we had to buckle down and win. That was the feeling.
Do you watch any war documentaries now, or do you just feel like they blow things out of proportion and don't really depict what actually happened?
Well, there's one, Ken Burns, The War.
I've never seen it.
You gotta see that. I think if you see that, you'll have as good an understanding of what was going on in the country and with some of the battles and the fight as anything. It's remarkably well done. And it isn't all blood and guts. It takes 3 or 4 different towns and cities in the country and what happened. And a lot of them are interviews with people like we're having now. And it's really well done. Some of the rest of it is, I look back now, once in a while, on the Turning Movie Classics, they'll have a old movie from World War II. Some of them are laughable. But if you realize the context in which they were made, and some of the reason for making them was propaganda, then it's not so bad. But they were, some of them were silly. Wait a minute, let me put it on here. You're going to end up in the dark over there with that camera. But it does get dark early these days, doesn't it?
Do you keep in touch with anyone that you met while you were in the service, or?
The ones I did keep in touch with are gone. They died. So it's nobody I was in service with that I'm in touch with anymore.
It's cool that you, like, at the Glen, know there's other people who went through World War II. I know a lot of people from my class are interviewing other people, so.
Well, yeah, but we don't talk about it an awful lot. You know, we had up here at the Glen, I had a Veterans Day breakfast. First of all, they put out a circular to everybody, you know, if you were a veteran, let us know where you were and what you did. So then they had a breakfast, which is a lot better than the old-fashioned chow line, I'll tell you. They had pancakes and bacon and eggs and all kinds of stuff. And we just sat there and enjoyed it, and we didn't talk about what we did too much. Some, yeah, but not an awful lot. And one fellow said, oh, the best food was in the submarine service. He was in the submarine service. So I said, gee, that was all volunteer, wasn't it? He said, yeah, young and foolish. That's right. He didn't say anything else.
So you don't really talk about it a lot?
No, not much. It's over and done with, pretty much.
Are there any other parts of the world you'd like to see?
Would I like to see? Oh, yeah, but I never had the opportunity. There's a number of places I'd like to go and visit, but we didn't for one reason or another, and I don't think I'm gonna now. We're just getting to that stage. And Janet, my wife, is in a wheelchair most of the time, and it's tough for her traveling. So.
If there was one thing that you wish my generation would remember about the World War II period of time, what do you think that would be?
Wow. Well, I should mention another, you wanted another book by Tom Brokaw, The Greatest Generation. That's a good book.
In class we had to read The Good War by Stud Terkel.
Uh-huh.
That was a pretty good book.
Yeah, yeah. The Greatest Generation is good. And that and The War by Ken Burns gives you, I think, an appreciation of what we went through. And it wasn't, how do I say it wasn't all bad. But even on the home front, you had to make sacrifices. There were shortages of this and that and the other, and there was rationing. You weren't going to die for lack of food or anything like that. And if we had lost, it would have been a big difference to your generation, but we didn't. You know, we won. And it wasn't just Americans; there were a whole bunch of other people in it with us. And I think if you, the thing disrupted everybody's lives, not just young people that went off into service, but it had a disruptive influence on everybody, because you couldn't go where you wanted to. You didn't have gasoline in the car, for the car. You couldn't get tires for your car. You couldn't get all the food that you wanted to. It was rationing. But they were relatively minor sacrifices, because the men and women in service were making an even greater sacrifice. So, I guess it's hard for me to try to explain to you what it was like. That's just the way it was. and I don't know whether talking to people like this give you as good a view or not, because each one of us obviously had different experiences, good, bad, or indifferent, during that time.
Thank you for sharing your story with me.
Pardon?
Thank you for sharing your story with me.
Oh, it's if you wanted to find out about what combat was like and this and that, then I'm not your man. But I just thought that meeting Eisenhower and seeing really what kind of a person he was meant a great deal to me.
Yes, really.
Yeah, yeah. He was.
So he still had so much power, yet he was so humble.
Yeah, yeah. Of course, then he went on. You know, he left Columbia, and then he went over to. He became head of NATO when they formed NATO. Then, of course, he came back, and he was president for 8 years. And you talk about power. Wow. But I don't think really he ever changed. Basically.
He's still the same person.
I think so. I think so. Geez, if he had time to think about me out in the rain, you know, which was nothing. But he thought, you know, why go through all of this fancy stuff of marching and dressing up and in a hot climate? You know, you said before, it must have been tough trying to be in uniform. We were never in uniform, except that one day. Then we had the ties, you know, and the leggings and the boots. It was hot. And he felt that was all unnecessary. And I appreciate that.
Sounds really awesome. Sounds like a really good guy.
Pardon?
He sounds like a really good guy.
I felt, yeah, I voted for him. Yeah, he was, and he was, I think, that way up until the end of his life. I think he had used the same principles when he was president as when he was commander. And a lot of what he had to decide was oftentimes diverging opinions as to how to fight this war. And you either pick A or B, and if you pick A, B's going to be unhappy. But he had the facility of making a decision, and both sides were happy. It was his personality.
Big feeling to satisfy those people.
Yeah, yeah. And it turns out he was right.
Those are all the questions I have for you. Thank you for letting me take your time.
Oh. Made me feel young again for a little bit anyway. But, I just hope you have to pass this course, don't you, to graduate? American history? Yeah. That they haven't changed at all in New York State schools. You have to pass American history.
Oh, I took American history last year. This is a World War II class. It's a whole separate class.
Oh, it is?
It's just focused on World War II. Like, we go through all, like, the major battles and,
oh boy,
like, all the major generals. And we just watched a movie on, like, Hitler's last days in his bunker. And we just go over everything like that. Because Mr. Roselle thinks it's a really important time in history that's kind of forgotten. It's swept over underneath the rug.
Does this last all year?
No, it's half a year.
Half a year?
Yeah.
Say, wow. Oh, so that's in addition to American history?
Yeah.
Jeez, no wonder you kids are so much smarter than us old folks. My golly. Really? Because I can remember that you had to, there were 3 subjects, and one of which I forgot, but you had to pass 4th year English and you had to pass American history. And you could be an A+ student. If you flunked either one of those, you didn't graduate from high school with Regents diploma. It was really something. And so that usually came, American history usually came in the senior year. And what if they, I'll never forget, no, it has no, you better turn that thing off because I'll
Let me turn it off.
Yeah.